Since you're full of the beans, I'll let you intro on this one.
Hey guys, welcome to episode 101 of the Remind podcast. You're joined by myself, Dr. Ashleigh Moreland, and David Masterton, and this is going to be our first of our new style of content. And
Top tips,
yes. And so Dave and I were just talking before we press record that this is really exciting because this style of content, we've pitched a question. We just put out a question. Each of us have to think about that and stew on it and ponder on it and come to our recording session with our own unique individual answer. But neither of us have any idea what the other person's answer is going to be. And so I'm like quietly anticipating going, oh, what's his answer going to be? And I think this is going to be really fun.
I think so.
The first question that we pitched was, what is the worst parenting advice you have ever heard? And what would you do instead? So since I introed Dave, I'm going to make you go first.
Done. Okay, so worst parenting advice I've ever heard was don't let your kids win an argument. And I'm talking like really young kids.
Yeah.
Don't let them basically get one up on you. And it's always like every time there's a conflict, you have to end up dominating, like the dominant one. You can't let them sort of quote unquote walk all over you. And the funniest thing is the advice or where I heard it was actually coming out of my own mouth.
Ah. So in that moment, were the person speaking it and the person observing you speaking it? Was it obvious at the time?
At the time, absolutely not.
Okay.
It came
so
from
it was like a future version of you.
Yeah, it came from a good place. And I lived by that mantra when the kids were very young. And so now when I look back on it, it's like, oh, okay. All right. Well, it works in a sense of discipline. 100%. Control, yes. Will they listen to me? Yes. Do they feel safe? Well, yes and no.
Yeah.
So, but now when I look back on it, so could I have handled it a different way? Look, yes. Okay, if I say no, it's a no. However, instead of being so battle related or discipline related, it's more trying to understand what it is that their needs are. And look, when we're dealing with really young kids, chances are they don't necessarily know.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily always trying to negotiate with a 3-year-old to try and get them to calm themselves down. Sometimes you need to put in those hard boundaries so they know what to push up against.
Yeah.
But when it becomes your only tool in the toolbox, which is kind of what I was using because I didn't have the ability to have the vulnerability in the past, then that would be my sort of go-to. Now, the kids are my kids, very compliant. They understand what I mean, and I say what I mean what I say.
Yeah.
And all of that. And I don't necessarily have the issue of they won't listen to me, because I suppose from a young age they sort of went, if I don't listen to him. But where I've been able to grow into that is with that emotional understanding.
Yeah.
So that's me. That was the worst advice I've ever heard. And it was myself.
And so what would you do instead?
Well, and it's very unique based on each situation, right? I would try and not be so one-eyed or use it all the time. I believe it has a place when it comes to helping your child, because what I observe in some other children, when they don't have that boundary to push up against, if there's no boundaries, they're just everywhere. They just don't know what to lean up against. Like to find a boundary, you need to hit it or break through it.
Yeah.
So I was very good at doing that. So what I would do differently is still have that, but not have that as the only response. But having said that, back when I was doing that, I would also not always say no, or not. I didn't have to always fall back into that disciplinary side. Like if I didn't have capacity and I wasn't prepared to, let's just sort of say, defend my position, if they wanted something, I would just say yes.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't go, no, 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 no. Yes.
Yeah.
Which is, something when I was a kid happened to me. So I was just taught that no is just another slight hurdle towards a yes or a maybe or a little bit or a absolute gut-wrenching scream, which is like, okay, you really mean no. Okay.
Yeah. Interesting.
So to answer the question, what would I do differently? I would still have it, but I wouldn't use it 100% of the time. I'd probably use it 50% of the time, and then be able to sort of bring in what is it, what they're needing, maybe, use different techniques, which is play and things like that, as opposed to always feeling as though that, every tantrum is a opportunity to win.
Yeah.
As a parent.
Yeah. That's powerful. It's really interesting. Okay, so I'll go into mine. It's really interesting that the theme for both was around tantrums.
Oh.
Because my worst parenting advice I've ever heard was also how to handle tantrums. And the advice was smack them or ignore them. That's the only way they'll learn. Because they're just doing it for attention.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. I actually parented like that. Same as you. Like, I parented in that way in my early life because I didn't know any different. And I thought that being a good parent was about getting my kids to be compliant. And if my kids complied, didn't matter if it was because they feared me. It didn't matter if it was because of whatever reason. If my children complied, then they were good kids and I was a good parent.
Well, it was seen. It was observed that you had them under control.
Exactly.
They were of a behaviour that didn't trigger other people.
Yeah.
And that they weren't out of control and you weren't out of control.
Yeah.
And,
Absolutely.
Wow.
And the thing that, oh man, I've got goosebumps at the moment, just reflecting back to the moment that especially, the smacking them thing kind of just took care of itself because of the internal feeling that I had one time I smacked my son and just went, I never want to do that ever again. So that kind of just resolved itself. But I've got goosebumps reflecting on the moment that I learned about the impact of ignoring a child. Have you ever heard of the still face experiments? Oh no. My gosh. If you are watching this or listening to this and you've never heard of the still face experiments, go and Google it. There's definitely still face experiments. And it was all these experiments that were done in babies and young children. And basically, children are not just small adults. Children are children. They don't have a fully developed brain. They're developmentally, they're infants, So it really taught me that behavior and emotions was their way of trying to express communication and to reestablish safety. And when I watched this video, I was actually researching for preparing for a university thing I was lecturing on. And I stumbled upon this. I'd never heard of it before, and it broke me. I remember just being devastated, almost like it pierced my spirit. It ruptured my soul in that moment of going, oh my gosh, that's what has been happening to my child every time I followed that advice to ignore them. And and it absolutely broke me. So watch the video because essentially the still facing experiment. The still face experiment. And so what happens is, I'm going to hack this, but in a nutshell, the parent, there's all these different experiment protocols where the child initiates play and the parent responds to that play. And it's also going to start to make a whole lot of sense why we called our parenting course responsive parenting.
Gotcha.
Because in these experiments, the child initiated through expression of emotion or through just social cues, and the parent responds. And the child, you can see that through their mannerisms, through their body language, through their expression, they're feeling very safe, they're very regulated, they're very embodied. But then there's a series of experiments where the child still responds, like initiates some kind of like the serve and return connection and communication, and the parent just completely ignores them.
Oof.
Their job is to keep their face completely expressionless.
Oof.
So no expression whatsoever, hence still face.
I could just imagine what the kid would feel.
Yeah. And in these experiment, like the videos of the actual research videos, you can see the children progressively becoming more and more distressed. And their emotional outbursts and their expressions through behavior were getting more and more escalated. And you could see the transition of their nervous system moving from a safe space where they served and were expecting a social cue in return, but they served and it was just completely lost, which means they've actually been energetically abandoned in that moment. And so as a product of dysregulation, what's the stress responses that come up? Fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And that's what you would see. So you would see these little children who would escalate into a fight response, and they would start shouting and like really demanding for the safety of their parents and caregivers to start engaging with them again, that co-regulation. Or they would completely just check out, and you could see this almost absence on their face. Scary, right? Complete dissociation. The child would be learning dissociation as a survival response in that moment. And what was really amazing was seeing the progression of this play out, and the most amazing research in this space is that even though they had all the physiological data of the children that showed that they were in a trauma response, their sympathetic nervous system was majorly activated, they were really dysregulated because of that lack of emotional connection. Even if their physiological responses were escalated, they returned to normal upon repair. And so that was
is this quickly, or is this over
pretty quickly,
time?
yeah.
Okay.
It's fairly quickly. So this really taught me about co-regulation. That was my introduction to it. And then, gosh, probably 4 years ago, I reckon, I went to the Childhood Trauma Conference, the International Childhood Trauma Conference. It was actually hosted here in Melbourne. And the childhood trauma experts from all around the world were presenting the actual neuroscience data on some of this stuff. And I walked out of that conference forever changed. And so that's what really made me super passionate about going, okay, if I smack my kids or if I'm ignoring my kids, I'm reacting from my own survival responses. And my survival responses are fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. If I can remain regulated and grounded, and I can respond to them in a relationally healthy and safe way, then it completely changes what happens in their brain. They don't need to be pushed into their own stress responses because they're borrowing my regulation. And this is what our course is all about, because my life was never the same again after that. And it completely redefined. It gave me a whole new frame of reference on parenting and on childhood behavior and everything. It was crazy. So anyway, I think
that's a pretty cool one. And here I am wanting to go long form and now talk about all of this with, highly, sort of hyperactive children and, very busy minds and all of that. It doesn't always work out that way, especially when I have William, especially someone who, I would say, especially when he was younger, didn't have access to a lot of this, but he would express himself physically
Yeah.
and love the sort of physical. So he would really enjoy, I suppose, well, he'd have to get things out physically.
Yeah.
And he did respond to smacking, which I hated.
Yeah.
But
That's the
now,
hardest thing, isn't it? Like when you do the thing and it works.
yeah, and but it was more along the lines of I was able to replace that with wrestling.
Yeah, absolutely.
And tight hugs.
Mm-hmm. And we had a couch.
Try and snap him out of that thing, pick him up and twirl him around.
Yep.
It's sort of,
it's all proprioceptive input, and that's taught in occupational therapy. Proprioceptive input. It's taught in occupational therapy. So occupational therapy is really driven by understanding the neuroscience of kids and their bodies and their needs. But it's about meeting their needs. If you know that your kid is seeking physical stimulation, Elijah need really, really vestibular input, so spinning was amazing for him. That supported his body and gave him the sensory stuff he needed, but also like the deep pressure. So, and also crashing, tumbling. So we used to put a pillow over him and literally squish him with the pillow and would make this big game.
I'm assuming over the torso here. For those thinking it's over the head. No.
Not over the head. And we used to have pillow fights. Pillow fights was a really good one because it was so regulating for him to have that. But they're things that are happening when we are in an embodied state. That's being present. That is engaging. That is relating in a healthy and safe way. Really different if he was naughty and I picked up a pillow and whacked him because he was being naughty. Do you know what I mean?
You're letting off steam. Absolutely.
Yeah. So life-changing stuff. I would love to know. Let us know in the comments, what's the worst parenting advice you've ever received? And
we can add it to the list and maybe have a bit of a chat about it.
Totally. And also talk about what you can do instead. I think that'll be really, really great. Interact with us, engage with us. These episodes are shorter in nature, but we really hope that they're insightful, and can't wait to hear what your worst parenting advice you've ever received has been.
Absolutely. And if you like this type of format, give us a thumbs up. Let us know.
Let us know.
And we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.